if you give them Wednesday, many of them are like, well, why would I come to school for 2 days?
Right, so they leave anyway. Yeah,
Oh, yes.
whatever you do.
Whatever you do
It's
doesn't
gonna be
work.
the opposite. Guess we'll stand while we're waiting. That's good sounds. Let's get started. Well done.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So, I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:33. This is the Amherst School Committee. 6:33 p.m. on the 24th of October. So, what I'd like to start by is doing a roll call. When I call your name, just say here or present. Gabrielle?
Present.
Jennifer?
Present.
Katie?
Present.
Roger?
Present.
Thank you. We have no minutes, so we're going to go right into public comment.
Point of order.
What?
We do have minutes.
They're not listed here.
They are in the agenda item details. They're in the approval of minutes agenda item.
You know, they're on
Board docs.
board docs, they're not listed.
If you go to the approval of minutes agenda item, it says minutes, view minutes for October 10th, 2023, Amherst School Committee.
All right,
Just click on it. And then,
so they're not on board docs,
are you logged in?
and I'm logged in.
All right.
Wait a minute, I am not logged in on board docs. I'm seeing what the public can see. And the public can't see it, then that's not a good thing.
I think you have to go into, like if you click on approval of minutes, there's a document in there.
I mean, I guess I could do it, but what I'm saying is that if it's not on the public part of it, in terms of approval of minutes, then I guess what I'm saying is, can we approve minutes that the public hasn't seen?
So I believe we've discussed before whether or not draft minutes should be available for the public, and at the time, my opinion was yes, they should be. I don't remember what we decided, but that's a good question. So that's maybe the question we could talk about. But on the public site, if you're not logged in, it does still say move to approve minutes of October 10th.
Yeah.
But you're right, the minutes themselves are not available. So that would be a conversation maybe the chair could have with Sasha
We'll have
about.
that conversation, but we're not going to do minutes this evening. I don't feel right about approving minutes that haven't been publicly posted.
Before we move on, can I ask clarifying questions about minutes, if that's possible? In terms of where they live after we approve them? And whether it would be feasible to maybe include the link to the recorded meeting on the minutes? Only because I note that it's very difficult to take minutes, obviously, during a meeting, but the content of the minutes is sparse in comparison to the actual conversation that happened. So I'm just thinking supplementing with the link would allow people to see the entire conversation if they desired.
I mean, obviously it's possible we could do that, and that probably is desirable. The question is administratively, what do we need to do to make that happen? Doug?
I can check with Sasha regarding that, whether we can add the link, probably put them in the bottom of the minutes at the bottom would be my guess is possible, but I'll double check to see if it's feasible.
It is, I know it's available like right after the meeting is recorded anyways on YouTube, Amherst Media's site, so.
Right.
So I have a question about that. I'm assuming that board docs and the material contained in there are intended to be archived by some standard, and the link to an external site might or might not be maintained in the same way. So by providing links, do we have any assurance that those links are going to be functional in the future?
We don't, and so I think that would be, sort of the caveat that would go with that link is that it's like this may or may not be persistent into the future, but the minutes themselves have to be sort of written and preserved, and that's the real record. The other would be just for convenience. So I think we just put a statement with it, just says that no guarantee that YouTube won't change where they put stuff, or Amherst Media may pull it down for their own purposes or whatever.
Yeah.
I have another question about minutes, Irv.
Yes.
In reviewing the October 10th minutes, I note that in the October 10th board docs meeting, there were actually 3 sets of minutes for us to approve, which I didn't notice at the time. 2 of them are attachments, and one of them is posted as a link within board docs, the July 19th meeting, and we didn't discuss it or vote on it at the last meeting, so perhaps that's something we can just do for the next time.
Yes, and I think it's obviously a topic that we need to work on, and I'll work with Doug and Sasha so that we could have a consistent minute taken, and approved, and displayed, and also archived so that we will have access to them. All right, next up is public comment. And I didn't have any that I saw on arts, and there's no one here. So we can move on to the next one, and that's the superintendent's update.
Okay, just a couple of things that I'll mention. We had early release last Friday. We have early release this Thursday and Friday in the elementary schools, where we have our parent, guardian, and teacher conferences. As I noted in the newsletter last week, it's an opportunity to sort of build those relationships with families and build those partnerships to work with families to promote the kids and their educational progress. And so just a heads up that that's coming up in the next few days. The second thing I'll mention is the Commissioner of Education had a meeting last week, I want to say it was Thursday, with all the superintendents across the Commonwealth to give us a heads up around an initiative that he spoke at the Board of Education today about, which is around chronic absenteeism. So even though attendance has recovered somewhat since the pandemic has eased, it has not returned back to its pre-pandemic levels. So chronic absenteeism, just as a definition, is more than 10%, which is 18 or more days. And so they're pushing for some initiatives around that and partnerships with districts around that. The commissioner hinted that there might be some funds available to help programs, but it was pretty minor, and it was going to require local initiatives and financing as well. I think they're open to any and all ideas around this. We've spent a fair amount of time and effort in our district over the last several years trying to work on various aspects of attendance and chronic absenteeism. So we'll redouble our efforts as we are noticing this as well, and we're working on those issues. But But I think, bringing it to the attention of the Board of Education and trying to get, a broad initiative started, in partnership with families around absenteeism is clearly something the commissioner's pretty motivated to do. Let's see, what else was the other thing I was going to say about that? The attendance so pre-pandemic, chronic absenteeism was much more prevalent at the secondary level, particularly high school. It was in the sort of 23% range. The overall chronic absenteeism level for the statewide was just about 13% pre-pandemic. It's gone much higher. It was almost at 30% during the pandemic. It's down to about 3% right now. What they've seen is that the secondary level absenteeism has almost gone back to where it was. It's still higher than it was, but not as much as the elementary. So in the elementary grades, what they're seeing is roughly double the chronic absenteeism than what they saw pre-pandemic, which is really concerning if you think about the sort of fundamental and foundational, education that happens in the elementary grades. So it's a pretty strong concern. If you look at something as simple as MCAS scores as an indicator, kids with chronic absenteeism score far worse on that. And that's just, sort of one measure of academic performance. There's obviously many, many others, but it's just a quick snapshot of how important it is to come to school. And so it's something Commissioner has identified as something that they want to work on and start working on immediately. And so we're looking forward to that. We have, a variety of things we do in our district. We're going to continue to do those things. And if there are new and better and interesting ideas that we can explore and that work for us, then we're going to look at those and partner with other school districts to see if we can improve our kids' attendance. And then let me mention one other thing and then we'll take questions. So the third thing is, on November 7th, it's Election Day. But among other things, the other thing that we're going to do that day in school is kids won't have to come. But it's a staff professional development day. We'll revisit topics of LGBTQIA+ for part of the day. Then at the building level in the afternoon, they'll do some additional work depending on the building and what their needs are, and they'll work on some other topics in that area. But we'll spend a full half day doing some additional training and education for our staff. And we'll have, again, we're inviting absolutely everyone to come. It's not a traditional work day for a number of our school year staff. They're encouraged to come. They'll be paid if they come. We strongly recommend them coming to it if they can. But certainly any teaching staff and any full year staff, we're gonna expect to be at that training in the morning for sure. And so that was the three main things I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. You can get a call on.
Yes, Gabrielle.
I have some questions about the absenteeism issue. You were giving some numbers that were for our district and some that were statewide, so I wanted to clarify. Did you say that at our high school, the pre-pandemic chronic absenteeism rate was about 23%?
No. That's the statewide number.
Statewide.
So all the numbers I quoted were statewide numbers as far as chronic absenteeism.
Okay. And so when you said that at the secondary level statewide, it has returned approximately to where it was pre-pandemic, but at the primary level, it's still higher. And is that true in our district as well, the same ratios?
So yeah, the secondary level for statewide is still 4 or 5 points higher than what it was, but for the elementary, it's roughly double. I haven't looked at our own data yet to know. I don't think we're quite as bad as the statewide numbers, but I think we still have a lot of work to do in that regard. I took a quick peek at attendance through the first part of this year. We had a number of kids in the elementary that have a fair number of absences. So if you think about it, we're about 30 days in as far as school days, which would mean 3 or 4 days is at that 10% level. We've got a number of kids that are at that level, more than I'd like to see. But we also, it's a tough sample to take because it's so small. So if a kid has COVID, they're out 5 days, that sort of cranks up the number. So there's some expectation of that to be had. At the same time, and that's something that the state, understands and recognizes as part of the, the issue here, but it's, even factoring that in, the numbers are really, really too high across the state.
And from a data disaggregation standpoint, I believe, because I was told this at one point, that 3 tardies ends up counting as an absence. And I wonder if, when you look at our district data, if you're able to disaggregate true absences, as in was not there the entire day, versus absences that have come from excessive tardies. Because it would be interesting to know if, some of those numbers are being elevated by this excessive tardiness.
Right, so sort of the three tardies equals an absence is more for period attendance at the secondary level, and it is something that we track and count, but it's not something where we change the data to do it. And so when we look at the raw data that's in our in PowerSchool, our student information system, which is what I was looking at before, and looking at the elementary in particular, it was just the raw originally entered data, so it unfortunately isn't overinflated, which would be helpful in some ways,
Right.
and not helpful. I mean, it's still problematic, but.
Good to know. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Katie?
So just keeping this to elementary, because I know we're in an Amherst meeting, you said you don't have any data that you brought with you about the elementary school absences. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Can I request that you bring that for our next meeting? And then I also would like to understand, I would imagine that there's a difference between excused and unexcused absences. Is that correct? And a COVID case would count as an excused absence, or maybe
Well,
I'm mistaken?
So there are differences between those two, obviously, but nonetheless, an absence is an absence. If you're not in school, you still aren't doing the learning that would happen, and so it's, the state doesn't distinguish with regard to its concern about chronic absenteeism and missing more than 18 days, because if you're not here, you're not here, good reason or not good reason, so it doesn't matter in some respects.
And then I guess I'd also ask what the policy is in terms of what teachers can provide students who are absent due to excused absences, or if they're sick, is there the option of making up work so that they can essentially get that knowledge learned? Because in the end, it's in part, yes, you want to be in school, of course, but if students are making an effort to get the work done, even if that means after the fact, I think there's validity there.
Yeah, I think as far as the commissioner was talking about some of the ideas, or whether or not to have essentially makeup days, like during the vacations in February and April, or something like that to provide more direct instruction time. With the elementary school, you're not as concerned. It's not like credit recovery. It's not like you're trying to get certain credits or grades specifically. So it is about continuing to progress through appropriately against the sort of standards for that grade level and the amount of material we're trying to cover. But it's really difficult to make up that for all the work you get. You also miss the instruction in class. You miss that dynamic and interactive time in the classroom. That's hard to make up in any way. So even if we give materials to folks, it's not the same.
Anyone else? Jennifer?
So what does the district do when we find that there's a student with chronic absenteeism? Like, what works to address this?
Oh, I think there's a whole host of things we do. It's part of its notification. Just being aware that there's that much absenteeism, because I think sometimes people forget that it kind of stacks up and it becomes significant. And because if you miss one day every other week, you think, oh, it's not that much, but it really does add up to quite a bit. So some of it's about awareness and notification to people. Just, hey, here's what's happening, but we also look at reasons for that. So there are a lot of different reasons. Sometimes folks have come from a place where regular school attendance is not part of the sort of culture and opportunity that's provided in some of the other places in the world, and so they come here and they're not used to having that as a habit. So it's about liaising with families to to understand and build that habit and that requirement and understand that requirement. It's working with families on addressing needs that they might have relative to whatever supports they might need. Sometimes the difficulty is a parent has to leave early to go to work, so kids are on their own to make it to the bus or not make it to the bus, and what kind of supports can we provide and work with families to make sure that that kind of thing happens so they get to school. So there's a lot of complicated reasons that go into it. We spend and try to make every effort we can to figure out for any given circumstance what's the right approach and what can we do as a district to kind of meet them where they are and provide the supports they have. So there's there's kind of a host of different things we look at, and it's often kind of on a personal sort of case by case basis or family by family basis that we're looking at. And we also understand there are kids that have chronic illness that requires them to be out quite a bit, and that's a different circumstance about how you approach that and how you make up that work and how you work with those families and those kids. So there's a variety of different things we do, but this is one of those areas where having a family center is really powerful as far as making those connections and building those relationships and problem solving with families to improve their kids' attendance.
Great, thank you. I'm glad to hear your answer framed as what can the district do to support families, because I didn't know before this what we do to when there is chronic absenteeism, but I guess my one piece of input would be that I would think it would be important not to shame or blame parents, because that, regardless of whether we obviously it's the parents of elementary students, it's their job, but I would imagine that's not something a family would respond well to.
No, and actually, that's actually a part of the framing that the commissioner had when he talked to superintendents is like, this isn't about blame or shame or anything like that. It's like, we just want kids to come to school, and so what do we need to do to get them here? And it's more carrot than stick circumstance for sure.
Anyone else? Just in terms of Katie, when the future agenda planning comes up, you had asked Doug to present something back. Would you please bring that back up at future agenda planning?
Sure.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, chair's update. There's just one thing that I have, and this occurred the other day, and it turns into something else, but 3 young people came to my door, a 5th grader and 2 4th graders. And they were going door to door asking people to, if they had students in elementary school. And what they were wanting people to know is that on Mondays, when there is no school because of holidays, etc., that there then isn't the ability for kids who have music instruction, especially music practice, to practice. So they were wanting to know whether there are ways in which the day could be arranged so that those students who were always on Mondays would not miss practices. I thought that was rather interesting. I did talk to Doug about it, and one thing that Doug and I agreed it is at some point we will have the principals come in to inform us to how the day is structured to address not only that, but just obviously other ways in which the day is structured. I commended those 3 students, 5th grader and 2 4th graders, for coming to talk to neighbors, especially since they wanted to be in school. They wanted to be able to practice. They wanted to have music classes. So that's my update. And then school committee updates. Any? Katie?
I think I have 3. The first is triggered, Irv, by your recollection of that event. I had the opportunity to go to Parents' Night at Fort River, given I have a student at the school, and was able to speak with some of the teachers and I think this is a good a place as any is to share that the evening was great in terms of the ability to connect with staffs and students and faculty and such. The one issue that was brought to light is the fact that neither two special teachers, IT as well as music, don't have a physical classroom this year, so they are a la carte, if you will. And this is definitely impacting sixth graders because chorus is held during recess, and so the ability to attend chorus is in competition with attending recess. And I think that's probably due to the fact that that's the available space at that time. So just want to put that out there that the numbers at Fort River are clearly not allowing our IT staff and music staff to have their own learning space. So that's maybe to be addressed. The other two elements I want to share is I was invited to an event more as a parent, not as a school committee member, at the Fort River School last Thursday, where there was a celebration put on and an expression of gratitude for the fact that Principal Julio is still at the school. So just want to, express again our gratitude. And then kind of along those lines, perhaps it's the reflection of the leadership or just the general school year, all the teachers I spoke with have just all good things to say. Like, they kept knocking on wood in terms of how their school year is going. And I can't speak to the other elementary schools, and I'm sorry about that, but good things happening there. And I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. New and continuing business, subcommittee assignments. Now, I thought that we had finished all of those except for the BCG, which I had wanted to put off because that group starts meeting seriously in January. And so I didn't think we had any others to fill, to put in there.
I don't think we do either. So I think I put that on there just in case we missed one. I was going through the sort of list of them today, and I think we're in good stead. So I just wanted to make sure we had it if we needed to, but I don't think we need to.
All right. Next, elementary school building committee update.
What do I have? Well, I had it just a minute ago. Hold on. I'm still a paper guy, so you'll have to get used to that. All right, summary of the meeting. The committee met virtually on 10/13, and they discussed the design and the development phases of the project. And they were making adjustments to this design phase for a couple of reasons. First of all, they wanted to facilitate coming in under budget at first. And so some of the changes that they made put them $44,000 under budget. Most were exterior changes facing to the building. They're going to use a different material. The design specialists who were at the meeting said there was no real difference, and it was a good place to save. There were some exterior changes to the playground. It's smaller, but not much smaller. But in the court, in the basketball court, they're reconfiguring them. They're a little smaller, but they're right within the same places. Another place where they saved a great deal, some of the granite curbs are going to be changed to asphalt berms. In some places, in less busy part of the driveway and so forth. In addition, the energy enhancing changes, they're talking triple glazed windows. And that's to approach zero net energy usage. And they think that the design specialists thought the triple glazed windows were it. They reviewed some invoices. I did not they did not put them up so we could see them. They set the next meeting for November 3rd, and it will be meet the same way. And they voted to send the design and development to the MSBA. And that's another thing, and I got it, it's the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And so they're to that stage. And they also voted to authorize the committee to send some estimates. And they were talking about there could be a 4%, with a 4% design contingency. Things may cost 4% more, and there may be 3% escalation, because if some vendor says, well, it costs 3% more, we can't not buy it. And that was the nature of the meeting. It was very, very organized, and it was actually fun to be a part of. I couldn't vote on anything because all my paperwork had just gotten in, and that was fine with me because I learned a lot, and for the things that they were discussing, it just made perfect sense. And that's my report.
Any questions? I have one.
Yes, sir.
Did they indicate when this would be going out to bid?
They did not say that, but it's very soon. I think it's after our 11/3 meeting,
All right, thank you.
and I will check on that.
I can offer a little bit to that. I think the first work would start, I think they said as early as March, so I think they may be going out to bid like in March, for March or around March. So I was also at the meeting. I just have a couple things I'll add that actually happened after that meeting, but is related to the update. So tomorrow morning, the MSBA board is meeting. There are recommendations that have been made. There was some augmentative funding from the legislature to MSBA to boost their resources available to help the projects that are in process like ours, and because I know there's some escalation of cost due to inflation, that sort of thing. And so the recommendation is going to be made to the board. Most likely will pass, but we'll see. It'll depend upon is to significantly increase the amount per square foot that they will cover. So, for example, MSBA doesn't cover the full funding of the project. They cover some percentage of the budget, and they basically give you an allowable dollar per square foot that they're covering. That number's noticeably higher in this new recommendation because there's some more funding available, and then they're recommending to the full board to adopt some changes relative to our project and others that are in different places in the pipeline. It won't change our overall budget. So to what Mr. Wallace was talking about at the beginning, which is what they were doing is, we have a fixed amount that we've been approved for and making things fit within that based on new pricing, and as that continues to evolve, that'll continue to happen. So we won't have a larger budget, but within that budget, the amount of support from MSBA is potentially going to be higher relative to this action tomorrow morning. So I'll be attending that meeting virtually, and they're supposed to take it up like one of the first things. So we'll probably, if there is good news, which I think there will be, I have every expectation that would be the case. But I'll send you guys notice just to update you on the action of the MSBA. Relative to that. So that was encouraging news as far as, affordability for the town of Amherst, and the burden that the town itself will bear maybe a little less relative to the total project costs.
So when is your estimate that this will go out to bid?
So my understanding, that there's a piece of work that gets started, first preliminary work, I think is going out so that it's ready in March, this coming March. But there's a tremendous amount of, site work that has to be done and preparation, that sort of thing. So I think it's, the construction process is almost 2 years because of when and where. But it could be as early as this spring, basically.
So you're saying that the bid possibly will be going out, not in terms of the entire thing, but in terms of sections of it?
Yeah, that may be.
Wow, that would
Yeah.
be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
And I can check on the particulars of that and get back to you. Again, I'm sort of climbing the learning curve like Mr. Wallace is to get
Right.
caught up as far as the mechanics of some of the steps,
Right,
but.
because the last time I was on this, and then others, that there was a bid, and then it was one bid. There were sections of that bid, but it were one bid, so that when the bid came in, you knew where you were. There wasn't any guessing.
Yeah.
You knew where you were.
Yeah, and I think most of this is that way as well. There may be a small amount of prep work that is its own section, but I don't know for sure. I'll confirm that and let you guys know.
Right. Anyone else? All right. So, superintendent goals, and we're talking about goals. There's definitely will not be any vote tonight.
So, just to take you through the document, the first two goals have not changed since, well, I'm not sure if this committee has seen them before tonight, but you would have seen them as a member of another committee. So the first two have not changed from the regional school committee meeting. Matter of fact, from the meeting, the regional school committee meeting that was scheduled, that we had last week, that we didn't get to this topic. Actually, goal number 3 hasn't changed either, and then goal number 4 did a little bit of refinement work on that and posted that today. So those are based on the feedback from another committee about these goals and sort of aligning them to all 3 districts. Added a couple of other things relative to what was first presented to the regional school committee. And so there's really, sort of the first goal is around, initiatives related for students and staff related to LGBTQIA+ issues. The second goal is around budget for fiscal '25 and the process of doing that and working with the committee and the public relative to that. Goal number 3 is tied a little bit to the question about 6th grade move to middle school, but more it's about our regional agreement and how that needs some modifications, some of which may be related to other changes like 6th grade moves or just other conformity issues that are in that. And then goal number 4 is along the lines of some things we're doing with math curriculum in both the elementary and secondary level and working toward keeping an eye on that and demonstrating how we're making progress relative to those initiatives.
Point of order.
Yes.
I have a question in terms of these goals. You mentioned that another committee has reviewed them. Can I ask which one?
So the regional school committee had it on their agenda for last time. They were
And
attached.
we didn't get to them.
Right, we didn't get to the topic,
Right.
but they were also, the goals number 1 and 2 were actually presented at the regional school committee meeting, the meeting before that, so probably 4 weeks ago now.
So my question is, if these are regional goals, how do they apply to, where are the goals specific for Amherst?
So that's a question for you guys to decide. These goals are written such that they apply across all 3 districts, and so there's questions about whether we want to write goals for one set of goals or 3 sets of goals. In recent years, the committees have tried to have the goals be very similar or aligned in some ways. If you'll notice these, some speak more to aspects of elementary school education, some speak more to secondary education. Some are across all grade levels. It doesn't matter in that regard. And so the other thing is that if you've looked at the actual document that you have to complete for the evaluation, it's rather involved. And if there are 3 sets of goals, there's quite a bit of compiling of artifacts and materials for those 3 sets of evaluations, and that also means that you guys would participate in 2 full evaluations, which is a pretty lengthy process. So it's your choice. I'll do whatever you guys decide to do, but that's in putting these together is thinking in terms of sort of a unified set of goals. But if you guys want to have your own that are either independent or some additional one that's related to that, it's up to you.
I don't know if I can continue.
Yes, go ahead. And then
So in terms of goals, I think it's very important that we set up this document, and I know it says draft, so I'm excited that it says draft, because I think the more we can provide SMART goals, if you will, with specific measurable indicators, the easier that evaluation process will be. So I don't think it's a matter of how many goals, or I do think there should be two separate sets, because I think the elementary schools have their own set of challenges that need to be addressed, and the goals that you create around those are very separate from the regional goals, the middle and high schools. So I would advocate that we have varying goals for each district. And so I think just rewriting these so that they are smarter, where they are, by time bound and there's clear indicators, come evaluation time, it will be an easier process to know whether or not, by way of observable data or other data sets, other indicators, whether or not the goal has been achieved. And I want to look again at the big picture of where we are in our district, and I think it's through goals and goal setting that we can really use this as a way to build trust, regain trust, and people can know what the setup goal is and know at the end whether or not the district has met its goal. So I would encourage almost a redrafting with more specific measurable indicators for this, and maybe adding some goals to this,
There's
specific to
a couple of things
elementary.
that I think. Over the years, as this has evolved, the superintendent evaluation was done via goal setting and artifacts to support the goals and objectives, and that's something that Doug can speak to as one. Two, in terms of splitting it between the region and the elementary, it was felt over the years through various school committees that it became unwieldy to try to do those. So that's why you will see in here there are goals that relate to the elementary schools and those that relate to the regional schools. But this process was done over time, and maybe it is something that the new school committee might want to take a look at. But before, the overall, the precedents, that which came before this boiled down to, hey, it's a lot easier and a lot simpler and a lot more productive to do one evaluation, have one set of artifacts, et cetera, to support the goals and objectives.
So the only other thing I would add is regarding the sort of time bound, they're all time bound because the calendar year is what it is, the school year is what it is. And for example, looking at goal number 2 around the budget, you guys, the regional school district will vote their budget and the Amherst school district will vote their budgets both in March. In February, we'll do a hearing, and in January, you'll get the full budget. And so the process is pretty time-bound in that regard. So those are dictated pretty significantly. I think regarding the others, as far as the LGBTQIA+, I think we'll probably do regular updates as far as how we're progressing with regard to that, and we'll collect and gather those artifacts. The artifacts will have to be gathered for you to review in mid-May to late May, so that you have time because you have to do all this in open session. You've got one, Amherst meets once a month, region meets twice a month, generally speaking. And so there's that is a component of how much we do as well. Goal 3 is again, it's a matter of compiling data. And so that is, probably going to be a single document that has a laundry list of things that could be topics for consideration. And I think goal 4 is probably the most open-ended of the bunch. And I think that it's really about trying to find ways to sort of gather and document that activities are happening. I think at this sort of high level, it's less concrete in some of the material things that you present as known. particular data points that you bring. You bring a composite of activities that happened in the schools to sort of demonstrate that these activities have occurred. And so some of what will happen, like with iReady, is like what trainings did we have, what were the material topics covered. To my mind, that's still, measurable. It's like it did or didn't happen. It's more binary in nature and less about, sort of how did we do relative to X or Y. And so I think that we're going to demonstrate that those activities happened relative to those things. So I'm held accountable by virtue of some of these things did or didn't happen. If they didn't happen, then, the goal wasn't met. But I think the other, sort of urgency I have for you guys and for all three committees actually is we're, heading toward the later part of October. This helps focus, my attention as well as staff's attention and administrators' attention relative to the things that they're keeping in the forefront of what they're doing. And the longer before we get them, sort of ready and approved, then the more difficult it is to get them accomplished. The only other thing I'll point out is that the maximum number of goals is 8 by contract. And if we have 3 committees and they each have 3 goals, that's 9.
All right, so, Doug, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're wanting us to come back to approve the goals because of the the clock is ticking. And you want them before. When would you suggest that we need to get this done and have a vote on it?
Well, your next meeting is scheduled for the 21st of November, which is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which is another topic about whether you want to meet on Tuesday or Monday or switch it to a different day in that week. But, it's another month before you meet again. So that's the other piece about, they need to be approved by then, just to have any chance of
Are you
getting
saying by then, or in other words, could they be approved at that meeting?
They can be approved at that meeting.
All right, good enough, because right. One more thing, and I really want more detail around moving 6th grade to the middle school. You indicated there's something about the regional agreement, and then I do know there are issues around the physical condition of the building that needs to be addressed. And the only reason I'm saying that those are 2 critical issues that we need to know more about, because the 6th grade has to move to the middle school. There's no alternative to that we have on the table. So if you could give us a little bit more information on what changes might be needed for a regional agreement, what is the process for that? Does it just involve the school districts and the region, or does it have to go outside of that to the state? And then, more importantly, the issues surrounding the physical condition of the middle school and how that impacts the move of the 6th grade to the middle school. So if you can address those, I would appreciate it at this time.
Yeah, so on the building infrastructure, I think that there are some modifications that were identified, which when we get to the next topic are probably in the list there, some modifications to some facilities and particularly restrooms and that sort of thing that we might have to undertake. It's not that it's not possible, it's just would it be better to have some of those modifications made. I think from the regional agreement standpoint, the state has taken a more open-minded view to narrow changes to regional agreements, so it's more possible to have a sort of more focused adjustment to regional agreements around this kind of topic if we needed to adjust. And so I think that it used to be if you went into your regional agreement, it was like a complete rewrite from start to finish, and that's a really huge project that's quite involved. They're allowing for more, like I say, sort of narrow and focused topics, so it could be a circumstance where it's not as onerous as it once was. So that's good news, actually, because there are some things around if we were to add 6th grade somehow to the regional agreement, there are some aspects of that could simplify some of the move and some of the infrastructure things that we'd have to do. as it currently sits, if we don't have a change to the regional agreement, so the sixth grade is still independent, it's part of the Amherst School District, then it really has to be set up as a separate school within a school, with its own administration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, when we get to the next topic, we can talk about some of those points a little bit more. But I think that the infrastructure is definitely a question we'd want to address. It's not, to my understanding, it can be accomplished over time, and we might be able to make those modifications without too extraordinary, not as extraordinary a capital project as one might imagine. The regional agreement, again, I think is an option that we can explore that might be useful to us and helpful to us.
All right, so, it's impossible to deal with those, but in future meetings, we're gonna need to start timelining this out. Because first, there are budgetary concerns on the capital side that we're gonna need to deal with. And secondly, if this is gonna be a more convoluted process in relationship to the regional agreement, we need to know it sooner rather than later. Anyone else? Jennifer?
So, my recollection of what we've done in the past for goals is that there are a number of overarching goals that apply to all three districts, and then there's one or two specific for each of the districts. So there might be one specific elementary one, and then other goals that are overarching for all the districts. If this body is gonna vote to approve a goals document, I don't think it should include any mention of secondary things, because if we approve it, but then the regional school committee doesn't approve it or approve something different, it's just a little weird. So like you've got established grade 7 through 12 student advisory group on the elementary. I don't know, it feels a little odd to me. I'm sorry, I don't recall how we've done it in the past, but I thought that there were some overarching goals, but then some specific elementary goals. Or maybe this is, I agree that goals should be SMART, specific, measurable, actionable, and all those good things, but maybe this is too specific. I don't know, it's a little odd to have secondary things mentioned on a document that the Amherst School Committee is going to approve. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I feel like there should be something about the elementary school building project. Whatever it is that the superintendent is responsible for this school year, should be on there. I don't know what that is in terms of the process and where the building project is, but I think that's gonna be an important role for the superintendent this school year.
Anyone else? Gabrielle?
With respect to the goals on here being something that will play into an evaluation, the fact that the goal 4 sub-bullets are stated in a very general fashion, I think is going to make it a little difficult to evaluate those. The first one, documenting and reflecting, yes, that's a check mark. You either documented and reflected or you didn't. But the second one, overseeing the efforts, I think that could be more specific with respect to perhaps what is expected to be the outcome there. I've been trying to, as I've been sitting here trying to figure out how to reword that so that it could actually end up being evaluated as a specific component of the goal. But I leave that in your hands. I think that will be a little difficult as an evaluation item from a goal standpoint. And then with respect to the comments that have taken place about it being separated out, my suggestion, just my own, is that some of these bullets could simply have like an asterisk or a star or something next to them that indicates that they are applicable to the Amherst elementary schools. There might be a way to just sort of code specific bullets to which school district they apply to, and then the voting committee can then vote on those items that are indicated as applicable to their school district. And that would mean, you don't have a separate list, but you just have some codes next to each bullet. It's a suggestion.
Katie?
I have a kind of a technical question in terms of, I know there's an evaluation committee at the regional level, and I'm not sure we have that at the Amherst level, but my question is, you're saying we need to approve these by the 21st. My question is there a system or a committee in place, or could be put in place to help, and if you're willing, provide feedback and structure to the goals? Because I see an evaluation as, if you will, a summative assessment in teacher talk, whereas I think so much of this could be put in terms of more formative assessment to support you, Doug, in terms of how you get to achieving the overarching goal. And I think with some refinement and some SMART goal implementation, it will come May, or whenever the evaluation takes place, it will be a lot easier to evaluate, and throughout this whole year, it will be a lot easier to achieve along the way and be acting towards the goals. So I guess that's my question is, like, are you willing for a collaborative approach to refining the goals?
I think that the issue that has to be thought about and obviously would have to also be done in conjunction, in collaboration with the region, is that, as Doug said, there are only 9 goals.
But there's 4 listed here, right?
Yeah, but there are only 9 between us.
I think that's okay, yeah.
All right, so the question is, what 3 or half, or what you want to do, 4 does the elementary schools want?
And is that what we're discussing, or should be discussing now?
Right, we need elementary, if you want to break them out by 2 categories, secondary and elementary, what are the elementary goals going to be? And are those elementary goals going to be 3 or 4? And if they're going to be 3 or 4, how does that impact the goals on the side of the region, which has to agree to limit theirs to X number? In other words, we can't just do it on our own. We have to do it in conjunction with the region. Jennifer?
My understanding from having done this in past years, as I said, is that there are a few goals that are overarching and cover multiple districts, and there's one maybe for elementary. So I don't think we need to take the 8 or 9, 8 I think is what Doug said, and divvy them up between the districts. That would not be my suggestion, but I'm not seeing where you're going, because I don't think that's what anyone suggested, that we take the 8 and divvy them up between the committees. I think what has worked in the past is having a number like 4 or 5 goals that are over all the districts, and then maybe have one that's specific to the elementary.
All right, so if we take overarching goals, a number of them, I don't know what number, how many we would be suggesting. Those overarching goals are not only overarching goals that not only have to be approved by this committee, but also by the region. So that would be a whole other topic that the region and Amherst would have to take up. So then if we know what the number of overarching goals will be or are, which I don't know what they are, that again is a topic that needs to be taken up with the region. And then as to the goals that we would want for the elementary school, we would have to determine what those goals or goal would have to be, all by that November date. So I guess what I'm searching for is a way forward. Either are we talking about taking this document that's before us and not voting on it and having a new one? Or are we talking about using it in some way and modifying it? Gabrielle?
I believe that the discussion so far, as I interpret it, is that this document can have some edits made to it based on some of the feedback we've provided, but that we don't need an entirely new set of goals. Potentially, there can be a goal added that is specific to the elementary level, Amherst Elementary Schools, addressing things like the new building. And if some of the items that are already listed on here also apply to the elementary level, they can be called out for, specific discussion by this committee. I think it's really just a matter of making some edits to this document so that we are ready to vote at the November 21st meeting.
All right, so let me go to Katie before I come back.
No, Roger.
Roger?
Has had his thing.
Yeah, I was looking at these, and if everyone seems to have a copy or print digital one. Look at goal number 2. Goal number 2 is really clear, and I think the region would be interested. I know we are, because the 3 steps or the measurables right there, I wouldn't want to mess with that one. That one seems the FY25 budget planning and communication by collaborating, communicating, and engaging. Sorry, Doug, you're going to be meeting with a lot of folks. But what I'm saying is, if we went through and say, all right, goal 2, we don't need to mess with that one. We don't, if everyone agrees, or if everyone sees where I'm going, because that's something that each one, the region and Amherst, has to do.
Right.
Okay, that's all I want to say.
All right, anyone? Jennifer? Then I wanna
I was
break this
I was
up.
heading around where Gabriella had headed, which is that I think maybe the next steps are Doug takes our input and revises the document as he sees fit based on our input and brings it back to us, hopefully with more time to review the document before the next Amherst School Committee meeting.
All right, so I take that to heart. What I would like to know is, what part of this document should you want Doug to do that would not infringe upon that which is the region? Jennifer and then Katie.
Well, regarding goal 1, I mean, to what extent do these bullet points apply to the elementary schools? Or are most of these region goals? Some of them seem like they would be appropriate for elementary, but I'm not, it isn't clear to me in goal 1. So which of those bullet points are within the elementary school? So maybe some clarification on that, or I don't know, this is a great list and this is the list that's being implemented right now, but I don't, it seems very region, secondary focused, and if there are items here that apply to elementary, that could be called out.
I would say all of the bullets, with the exception of the establishing a grade 7 to 12 student advisory group, apply to the elementary. It's
one?
different at the elementary.
This is goal 1?
This is under goal 1, so professional development, we're gonna do that with every one of our staff. Mandatory professional, sorry, opportunities for students to learn about gender and sexuality, that's a K-12 question. Process and procedure of updating names and pronouns, that's a K-12 circumstance. We have kids at all age levels that have that. That's actually in place to a large degree. The bullying reporting, that's a K-12 as well. So I think it's really around, the family advisory group is really across the whole spectrum of ages. I haven't checked in with to see who has actually been identified for that group. It may be sort of biased towards the secondary. But there's no reason not to have elementary parents and family members and guardians involved in that one for sure. So I think really, there's opportunities for for K-12, it looks different at the different levels, and that's part of what, when we sort of bring you artifacts that demonstrate what's happened and what's going on, we sort of distinguish those differences. So, as we saw last spring, there's some work that's been done at Crocker around gender identity and their health curriculum. We're looking to share that with some of the, the other elementary schools, but there are other ways and other ideas that people have and have been approaching that. And then at the secondary level, it's going to be, it's a little different focus for them. So I would suggest in that first one that it's really, with the exception of kind of that last bullet, it could really apply to both elementary and secondary.
Thank you,
Yeah,
that's
when I
helpful.
look at that, the last bullet point does it, but then when I go down, and so also go down to goal number 2, all of that, except for the last bullet point, engaging municipal leaders from all 4 communities to promote common understanding and multiple perspectives on school spending. Now, you could, because that's usually, it's a 4-town meeting and all that, but if the 4 communities weren't in there and it was just Amherst community, it would definitely be applicable to the Amherst goal. Then moving in goal 3, bullet point number 2, I have no idea what that means. Because that, the change of government happened 6 years ago.
I know. But so in the document, it mentions Select Board of Amherst,
Yeah. so
that kind of thing.
yeah,
It's
right.
that's more I-dotting and T-crossing, but it's still a technical change that's got to be made. So that was more of a technical one, but there are some other aspects of that technical change that are more nuanced than that.
Right. So, and then goal 4, the I-ready math. I'm assuming that's the elementary. Yeah, it's elementary school. And then overseeing efforts of math education, arms and air. That's definitely region.
I-ready does get into middle school as well, but not high school.
All right. Well, we can deal
But
with
it's
that.
mostly K-6,
K-6,
K-5, 6,
K-6.
but it does bleed in a little bit to the middle school, not as much as it does at the lower elementary grades, but.
So when I look at this document, we certainly could knock out the ones that definitely we know do not apply to the elementary schools. And those that apply to the elementary schools, if we wish to have them stated in another way, in order to give Doug feedback, then we need to make that happen.
Question,
Yeah,
just
Ben.
procedural question. Doug is preparing a document that has a set of goals on which the superintendent will be evaluated for this academic year. So, I'm questioning whether we need to remove the items that are for the 7 to 12, or just keep this document the way it is, so it is one coherent document, and simply say that this committee will vote on the items that apply to the elementary schools, so that we're not creating different versions of the document, which I think can later
Yeah.
on lead to confusion. I think it's more an issue of how we word our vote on November 21st and keep this as a clean, single document.
All right, I agree with that. And,
too.
but before I move, Katie?
I again want to ask if it's possible to work with you, Doug, and I'm happy to take this upon myself, but again, I'm thinking towards the future in May, and as they're stated now, even if we're just focusing on the Amherst schools, it's hard to know, based on how they're worded, whether or not the objective or the goal has been met. So if you're willing, and I'm happy to take this upon myself and meet with you individually, is it possible to reword them so that they are more measurable? Like in terms of the professional development work, that first bullet under goal 1, I think the level of specificity is really important, right? Like what % of teachers, staff will have received training, how many hours around what topic? So then by the time May comes and the evaluation is taking place, we'll have known that on November 7th, for example, there was, you know, professional development and people at X number of teachers attended, et cetera.
All right,
So if there's a willingness for collaboration, I'd be happy to step in and rework the document so that prior to the 21st, we can have a clearer idea, so that it'd be easier to vote on it.
all right, so Doug, could you talk about the artifacts that you would have in relationship to bullet point number one? Bullet point, first bullet point,
So,
The indicators, you mean?
artifacts that he would be bringing to support having met that objective or goal or not having.
right, so the first bullet, professional development work focused on LGBTQIA topics will be ongoing mandatory PD work for administrators throughout the year. Inclusive of this, we'll be reviewing disciplinary responses with a focus on appropriate responses to harassment and bullying incidents. So, part of the information we gather together relative to this is the specific trainings we did with administrators. Some of that will be the same as the teachers, but it won't be exactly the same. So we'll articulate those trainings that we did and what topics were covered, agenda and/or slide decks that go with that. As far as the review of disciplinary responses with a focus on appropriate, we'd look at all of the bullying and/or harassment incidents throughout the year, the responses, the timeliness. And so we could, we would look at a variety of different vectors of that to determine whether we're meeting our objective of being responsive to those topics. And so there's a number of different ways to look at that, but we wouldn't actually bring the harassment or bullying forms to you, but counts of and timeliness of response and numbers of bullying incidents determined, harassment incidents determined, probably give you samples of kinds of resulting action steps that we took, not specific to any particular case, but just the kinds of things we do in and around and responding to that. So there'll be a fair amount of materials that come with that. When we talk to professional development of other staff, then it's there's some parallels there, right? And articulation of here are the materials we covered, here's the content that was in them, here's when they were, how often they were. Some of that also in that second bullet point is really about getting to building systems of induction for new employees too. So what is our process and procedure around that we build and the documentation of that, so that we are making sure that new staff or staff that miss periods of time and miss trainings are being caught up, and how we go about doing that. And so I think there's a number of ways that we can demonstrate those in a pretty specific way.
Irv, I like where you're going with it in terms of Doug is outlining what will be produced, the indicators. So my suggestion would be we continue along that trend and state the goal just as he's kind of summarizing what the indicators would be.
The other thing I would just suggest is that the part of why they're a little broad is because the specifics of what we're actually going to do is not well defined just yet. So that's part of why I wanted to leave the language a little bit broad, so that we have the flexibility and the ability to kind of discover and act in ways that sort of best serve the district as we sort of learn and respond, and build a little self-reflection cycle in and as a part of that. Because I think if we had all the answers, then it's a series of check boxes that we just check or we don't check. And there's some aspects of this that have that. There's no doubt. There's some aspects of this that are very much programmatic that way. There are others that I think, especially around professional development and getting feedback from staff and understanding where they are and where they need to go is dynamic in how we do it.
All right, there are two things. One, we need to dispose of this and vote on this in November. Two is, are we going to vote on these goals as stated as it is in this document? And I guess three, if we're not going to vote on these goals as stated, what steps need to be taken to get them into a form that this committee thinks so? And then four, how does that then that then has to impact and be coordinated with the region, because we don't want to have Doug or another superintendent to have one set of goals, a set of goals that look different than the elementary school goals look different than the goals that the region has. In other words, there has to be some coordination. Yes, Jennifer.
What we have done in the past is that there have been two separate documents for goals that the Amherst School Committee approves and goals that the Regional School Committee approves. Two different documents. And I emailed them to the two of you. So you can see what was approved last year, which I think is the only way this makes sense, because it's kind of like Gabriella's point of starring the goals and indicating on a document whether it's a region or an Amherst goal, but then, like, if Amherst approves a document that has wording for the region, but then the region wants to edit it, it just doesn't. It's too complicated. So I think that's the only way this makes sense, is to have separate documents. And there's some similar wording in terms of the goals, like the budget goal would probably be similar on the two documents, but it was two different documents.
Yeah, I had always, I mean, maybe, I would like to view that, I didn't see that, but we had always voted on a document that was one document that contained the goals for both elementary and secondary. And if you're saying, hey, that's, what you have is not so, then we can then bring forward that document that you said you sent us, and work on that document that only deals with the elementary schools. Katie?
So, or speaking to, I think what your third point was about, like, the procedures to get us to a place where we could vote on the document. I am, again, putting myself out there. I'd be happy to review and restructure this document and can provide it to you, Doug, if you're even looking for this, like on Monday, the 30th. So then you could review and edit or whatnot, so that it's kind of a back and forth discussion. But I think as this stands, I would not be able to vote on these as goals on November 21st.
All right, so looking at what you sent, Jennifer, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that correct? 5, there are 5 goals.
4? Just 4?
Irv, I didn't send it to the whole committee. I don't know if that makes sense to look at it right now.
All right,
since
I'm
this
just
is
saying, I'm
last
going
month's.
down over, and there's 5 of them here.
I think you're looking at something that the rest of us are not looking at.
I understand, I'm just saying, all right, so anyway, I look at if I look at what you're saying, and that we voted on them separately. The elementary schools voted on them, on ours, and then the region voted on theirs. It would seem to me that these two would match up in terms of maximum number of goals that the superintendent is charged to carrying out.
I have a question. So going back to the point that Doug raised, that if we have a document for the elementary school, Amherst Elementary Schools, and another document for the secondary schools, then are we limiting him to a total of 8 that might only allow a certain number on each of these two documents? And does it mean that it's double the evaluation process? It is my understanding that if we can contain this all on one document and simply limit our voting to those items that apply to us, then we've just created a more efficient process. And I don't see any reason not to try to look for efficiencies here.
Man, this is like deja vu. Yes. Right now, my thinking is, if we are going to do, since we are going to be doing getting some kind of evaluation tool in place, that the document that we have before us, that when we voted on that document last year, I thought, and maybe I'm completely wrong, Jennifer says that we voted on two documents. The Amherst School Committee voted on one, and the region voted on another. And if that's there, if that is correct, and if what I'm looking at that Jennifer sent, that I would suggest that this document that Jennifer sent be
Point
made
of order.
available. What?
Point of order.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what Jennifer sent, what you're referring to specifically, but the document I'm looking at is the one that was emailed at like 2:30 or whatever this afternoon, where there's 4 goals. So I'm confused about.
Right, I know. What I'm saying is the document that Jennifer said we voted on, that the Amherst School Committee voted on last year, is this document that she sent, that she put, what you don't have access to. And then that we have this other document that we also voted on at the region,
So how does that relate to this discussion?
because the document specifically aimed at Amherst Elementary Schools is different.
2 different documents.
Two
One
different
for
documents.
Amherst, one for regional.
Yes,
Okay.
two different.
So I just want to go back to my point, and maybe, Doug, I can ask you outright. Would it be useful or helpful if me or others or whatever reworked these?
It's,
And I'm asking
No.
Doug if I
No,
can.
but that's, that is not appropriate. Anyway, what we.
Can you clarify why?
The reason it isn't appropriate because right now, you're saying you want to work with him on this particular document.
I'm asking if he would like support.
No, and and I am saying support around doing work that may not be germane to what we need to have done for Amherst. That, you're talking about doing work on that particular, the document we just went through. There's this other document that we haven't gone through in relationship to not only just artifacts that he'd have to produce for each of those. And I don't want to have him be working on something, 2 different documents, because he has an evaluation, the superintendent goals will be coming up at the region also, which will be the document that we have before us. All right, so I don't wish for you or anyone else to be working with Doug on something that may or may not be germane to the Amherst.
I have a
And
point
that's
of
A, and B,
clarification
I'm
too.
not, and also, B, I'm not sure, when I look at this, how that then impacts upon Doug and the total number of goals that we're allowed by contract to have with him.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yes,
So, for example, we just took goal number 1, and if I understood correctly, Doug, you mentioned that all bullet points under point number 1, with the exception of the final bullet point, excuse the expression, would be included in the Amherst set of goals. Is that correct? So then, I guess what I envision is this document, which has only 4 goals, a lot of the content here would be applicable for both Amherst as well as the regional school committee set of goals. Is that correct? And if that's the case.
some of it, I mean, I want to look at this, some of these, when I look at, that's why this thing,
And-
they came together, is because they do come together and overlap.
Yeah, and if that's
some-
the case, any restructuring we do for Amherst goals will benefit the region anyways, so when it comes time to review them at the regional level,
And I
It will be
can't speak for
similar.
the region.
yeah.
I can't speak for the region. And therefore, if we're going to do, if, it's a great suggestion, but I'm not going to say, hey, yeah, you go and do that, and then the region's going to agree with that.
And we can talk about that maybe November 1st if it's on the agenda.
The region is coming up, and it's a joint meeting, and it can be discussed.
So my offer stands.
All right, and again, I guess it's a great suggestion. If we can get this done in the region, because the region, there's a joint meeting, and that can be an item on the agenda that we can deal with then. That would be a heck of a lot more efficient and effective way of doing it, since it's a joint meeting.
So the couple of things I'll just mention is that, for the regional school district, you have a meeting on the 1st,
Yes.
and then Pelham will meet on the 7th, and then the regional meet on the 14th. Pelham's going to get one shot at this, pretty much, because they'll get a chance on November 7th to review in this and make their choice about the goals. The regional essentially have two opportunities, but I would want them to, again, I want the region to have voted the goals by the 14th at the latest, if not sooner.
Sorry, earlier you had said the 21st.
No, for
That's
you
August.
guys, you guys meet on the 21st. Region meets on the 1st and the 14th. And
Okay,
Pelham
I
meets on the
see.
7th. And so there's limited meetings for any of this to happen. The regional school committee does have a standing subcommittee for the evaluation process. It often includes members from all three committees, just so to get those other perspectives as part of their process of reviewing and thinking about this and offering that input. That's a direction that can also be taken as far as the subcommittee. I mean, that's one of the things that they've traditionally done is help frame the goals and have the perspectives of all three committees in mind when putting those together and creating that interaction. And then the secondary piece is putting the actual instrument together, which is, prescribed in a lot of ways, but just sort of folds the details of it in and compiling things. So once everybody sort of fills out their version of the thing, they compile it into a single document for each district. So those are there's a lot of sort of grinding work to be done on the back end. On the front end, they help sort of shape the conversation so that they're, dealing with the sort of viewpoint of all three districts.
Gabrielle, and then I want to wrap this up. Gabrielle?
So as a new member to this committee, I'm rather surprised that we've spent so much time discussing the procedure for how to evaluate the superintendent, given that I assume this is something that's done every year.
Every year.
And it seems like it would be good to have this process written down somewhere, because this is a lot of our time that we just spent discussing just how to do it. And frankly, I feel a little dissatisfied if all we do is leave here and say, all right, we had some comments, we'll leave it for the next meeting. I don't think we're gonna be any clearer on what we wanna do at the next meeting if we don't make some sort of statement about it now. So could we please, at the very least, decide if we are going to do this in two separate documents or one document, and why? And I don't know if that requires a vote or just a discussion, but I don't want to just kick the can down the road and then end up wasting time at our next meeting about procedure.
Right, there is a procedure for evaluating the superintendent, and that's somewhere there in board docs. And that there is a procedure for coming up even with this document. Usually it's a subcommittee that deals with does the first cut of this, and then brings it back to the entire committee to vote on, to approve or not approve. And I guess I do agree with you that spending this much time, I really didn't think we were going to spend this much time on it at all. But there were people here who had questions, there were members who had questions, and saw the goals as presented to them as something they couldn't vote on. So if you have that situation, then people ask questions. So that brings us back to here. How do we go forward with this? For myself, I would like to either vote on the document we have before us on the 21st with some changes, or vote on a different document that can be brought forward and vote on that on the 21st. Either way, we only have, there are two more meetings. There's the meeting in November, and then there's a meeting in December for the Amherst School Committee. The meeting in November, we would already have to have the goals outlined and ready for approval. So the question is, how do we get to that stage between now and the 21st, when we only gonna have one meeting? I would suggest that some good members of this committee, and I'll bring this forward as, you know, that someone else can bring it forward as a motion, that we form a subcommittee to put this document together, to bring it back to this committee for a vote on the 21st. That's what I would suggest. I'm not making that motion. Someone else could if they so desire.
Doesn't answer the question, though. Is it one document or two?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it is open as long as we stay within a certain number of goals.
Yes, I understood that. Okay.
Well, if we were forming a committee, am I safe to assume it would be at the Amherst committee?
Amherst,
Yeah, so that would mean there'd be one document produced by the Amherst
yes,
Policy-Making Committee and a
Yes.
separate one produced by the region.
yes.
So
That's what-
I move to create a goal-setting / evaluation committee for the superintendent goals.
Second.
It's not a very good motion.
It's been,
May I suggest two friendly amendments?
Please.
That it be a subcommittee of two.
subcommittee of two. I like that. All right, so can we just, instead of making it as an amendment, can we just restate it? I know it's in terms of rules, that's not correct.
If I
But is
restate
it
it, will
possible
count?
just to make it one?
Yes, you may accept the friendly amendment.
Okay, I accept the friendly amendments and suggest that the Amherst School Committee create a subcommittee of no more than 2 people to review the superintendent goals, whatever it was, the evaluation, serve in the goal setting and the evaluation process of the superintendent.
And I'm still seconding it.
Still second. So there's just one motion. Any discussion?
I'm in favor of the motion. I will be voting in
Yeah.
favor of it.
That's what I'm wanting to get to.
That's my
Is there-
discussion.
That's your discussion. Anyone else? All right, so all those in favor? Those who are not in favor? Any abstentions? Gabriella abstains. All right, obviously, the only thing that we didn't do in that motion is,
What was the count?
it was four and with one abstaining.
Thank you.
The only thing that we didn't do in that particular motion is to say, all right, we got this subcommittee. When will they be getting this back to us so that we will have it, prior to the 21st meeting?
Point of order.
You haven't
Point-
populated the
We
committee
need to,
yet.
we need to populate the subcommittee.
Oh, what, all right, Jennifer,
I recommend Katie Lastowski to be a member of the subcommittee.
any other volunteers to be volunteered? Katie, you were just volunteered.
I'm happy to serve.
Anyone else?
So we need to vote on that. Is that correct?
We said two, we only got one.
We said up to 2, I
Up to
think.
2.
Up to two, or is it one? I can't
think we
argue with
said
it because
no
I
more-
don't,
We said no more than 2.
no more than two.
Someone
right.
want to make a motion?
All right, I'll volunteer to be on there. All right?
We don't have to vote on that?
Nope.
Okay. So then in terms of a timeline, if I might suggest, and I'd be happy to put forth a draft on by Monday.
Excuse me. That's something for you and I to discuss, and then we'll get back, and we'll do that work. We don't need
Excellent.
to take up any time with that here.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna get back to the agenda. Let's see, sixth grade, it's remote and hybrid.
What happened to item D on the sixth grade move?
Let me go back there.
Can I just, I guess it's a point of order, I'm not sure where it falls, but I'm concerned that these documents, as of 11:30 last night, were not posted. And I'm not sure what other people's schedules allow, but I know if it's possible, I think at least a 24-hour time period to be able to get access to any items, agenda items, and the supporting documents that are going to be discussed in a particular meeting would be extremely helpful, and it would provide a greater number of people access in
Yes,
fulfilling our role in serving the public.
all right.
I want
And-
to support that comment.
All right.
These were not posted even as of
All right.
this morning, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that life gets busy, but
Right.
I was already at work
Yeah,
by the time these got posted.
that is
was.
taken very seriously, and we will try to get that done so that there's at least a minimum of 24-hour notice. And what you're saying is absolutely correct. I mean, it's hard for anyone to do a good job if you don't have at least 24 hours in advance.
And I guess my other question around that is, if it's required to have the agenda posted in a certain amount of time prior to a meeting,
48 hours.
correct, why is there not the same standard for any supporting documents to the agenda items that will be discussed?
I don't know. I mean, usually that which is going to be, that's 48 hours, it has to be on the agenda. Supporting documents don't necessarily have to be there. But that which is going to be discussed, i.e., like here, report on hybrid meetings and,
And I think we need to remind ourselves that our goal is to educate ourselves around what we're going to discuss, but we're also here to serve the public. And when we get it the same day, there's no way to reach out to constituents and gather feedback. And the more time we have to do that, the more democratic we are as a process.
right,
As a committee.
we're retracing steps that we're talking about something we've already talked about and discussed and said, yes, that is a great idea. And yes, it is good feedback. And myself as chair and Doug as superintendent will strive to make that happen in the future.
It's
Now,
been happening in the last 3
I can
years.
just offer one quick thing.
It's not a first offense.
Traditionally, we do try to have the attachments, when we post the meeting. Haven't been able to do that in the last couple of weeks. We'll get back to that process, just so you have the weekend to look them over, because it does take a little time to do it. Schedules haven't afforded that recently, but we'll be getting in more of a rhythm with all of the meetings, and so we'll try to have those for you. I appreciate that. And so these were things that crossed my mind today that might be of use to the committee relative to tonight's discussion. They're just historical documents about what has transpired. They've been in the public realm, just not attached to the agenda, but they've been in and around our agendas. I pulled them off of past agendas. So one is, a recommendation relative to encouraging the move for the sixth grade, and then one was the subsequent later recommendation to put a pause on that. So I just thought that would provide you some context, but again, didn't cross my mind, quite frankly, but also then didn't get a chance to get it on the agenda till today.
All right, let's go back to the missing, to the sixth, it was the sixth grade that we were discussing.
Can I make a motion I move, if possible, I move to table this discussion. I'm not sure how many of us are prepared to discuss it, and it's a 19-slide PowerPoint and a 3-page document with critical information that would embellish our discussion, I think. So I'd move to table it.
Second.
Well,
So
I can,
that's a motion.
I'll entertain that as a motion. It's been
It's
properly
been seconded.
seconded.
Second.
Yeah.
And I am going to then ask for any kind of, any discussion at all. Yes,
I think we can go ahead and have this discussion because these are documents that were, they're pertinent to January and February, and I think they're provided only as background at this point. So I'm not sure what exactly the discussion is going to be today, but I did quickly review these and don't feel that I need to know every detail of what's in there to go forward with this discussion. More importantly, I think it is important for us to have this discussion at this time because the next time we will be meeting is in a month. And I think this is a topic that's important enough that we should be talking about it as frequently as we can.
any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Come to a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand.
I'm tabling.
I see 3. All those not in favor, raise your hand. I see 2. It's 3-2. Motion passes.
Motion passes to table.
Motion passes to table until next time. All right. Remote and hybrid meetings. The documents that were attached were two of them. One was updated guidance from the updated guidance, and the second one was the executive order itself. And the only reason I'm bringing this forward, we will be discussing this at the region also, the same thing. And so I really just wanted to put it on the agenda as something that we will be voting on and would like to bring forward for a vote on the 21st. It doesn't, the vote would just be the sentiment of the committee. The law is the law. We have to allow remote and remote participation. The reason why the state has interest in this, the state has found that when they implemented this throughout the Commonwealth, attendance of meetings and participation has just skyrocketed. So that's why they were thinking about making it permanent in the future. Right now, it's good through the 25th, through year 2025. I'm just wanting to bring it forward for information purposes because I do know it's going to be brought forward at the region for a possible vote.
I'm confused. I think the executive order allows a public body to meet remotely, but does not require a public body to meet remotely, and does not even require remote access. It allows remote access, but doesn't require it. In fact, one of the documents you sent us, there's a
Yes.
purple highlighted thing that says a public body may continue participating in meetings remotely. But then it says a public body is not required to provide remote access if the meeting is held in a physical location. So we're not required, but we're permitted. So I'm not sure what we're discussing.
Well, if you, Jennifer, wanted to remote participate, how would that affect our decision-making?
I'm not.
Are you allowed, would you be allowed to remote participate?
So we, as a body, the Amherst School Committee as a body voted to, or decided to go back to in-person meetings a year ago, October of '22.
Yes.
And my understanding is that individual members, if they had to be out of town for that meeting, have participated remotely, but we've always met in person since October of
Correct,
'22,
and-
except for once then when there was a
Yeah,
storm.
And the only reason I'm bringing this forward is that I would like to see the committee have a statement that says, hey, are we going to allow hybrid meetings? Or are we just going to have in-person meetings? Gabrielle?
I have a question
There's-
about,
It's not, by the way, it's not for a vote tonight. There's, all right, want to make.
I have a
that clear.
question about, the decision that the Amherst School Committee made. I believe that the quorum is counted by those who are in the room, is that correct? In the physical
I-
location?
I think that's one of the things that the executive order addresses, which is that the quorum does not have to be physically present.
Correct, that's one of the things that the executive order says, but when Amherst School Committee decided to go back to in-person, did this school committee decide that the quorum has to be in person?
No,
Okay,
not according to my memory.
Yeah, you know, the executive order says, you know, it does not have to have a quorum in
In
present setting in
in the
order to.
physical setting.
Physical setting in order to conduct business. All right, I'll take Katie and then I'll come to you, Jennifer.
Just a point of clarification, excuse me. What is it we are, what's our objective in this agenda item?
Well, the objective, my objective, as I said, is only to make you, to make this committee aware of it and the issues around it, and that it's going to be brought forward at the region.
Okay, and so I guess a question I have is, I'm pretty aware of what town council meetings look like, for example, in a hybrid fashion. And the infrastructure at the town hall allows for a really successful meeting to occur. I guess my question, I'm less aware of what would that look like if one member is virtual and others are in person? How does Amherst Media capture the person who's attending by way of Zoom or Google Meet or the like?
You can, Amherst Media has the ability to do virtual meetings all the time if we so choose.
Correct, but what does it look like in this space? Like,
It looks like town hall. In other words, all of the meeting procedures, et cetera, are up here on the screen. People who are attending remotely, who have Zoomed in, would be up here on the screen. It's the same thing. There's no difference.
and then, oh, go ahead, and then I'll go back.
Yeah.
I believe that is incorrect.
What do you believe is incorrect?
I believe that in the cases that we've had an in-person meeting where one person Zooms in, my experience has been the chair has Google Meet on the chair's laptop. The person who's remote is on the chair's laptop, but is not
You missed something
projected
that I said.
on the screen.
I said if we were doing it virtually.
Okay, great. So but then there's no screen like this.
Yes.
If we're all virtual,
Yes.
there's no screen.
Obviously, we're all virtual. We wouldn't be in this room. We would be our individual.
Correct.
And
So
then the virtual would be the same thing as if you were in a regular Zoom meeting.
So there's fully in person and then there's fully virtual. But I thought you said hybrid.
You can do hybrid if it's.
So-
I understand where you're going. Yes, if we were going to do hybrid, it would mean that it's virtual.
I guess I still don't understand. Like fully virtual when we're all at home or
Right.
we're all in different locations and we're all meeting by Google Meet and the members of the public can join the Google Meet is fully virtual. In person is like we're doing tonight. My understanding of hybrid is if there were one member who couldn't be here in person because they had a conflict and they would be we don't use Zoom, but they would be Google Meeting. Is that what we're talking about?
No. If we were going to be doing this and we were going to be saying hybrid and in person, I would say that the only way we can do that would be conducive, convenient, accessible for everyone and be a good experience, there would not be hybrid, it would be virtual, even though people could be sitting right here if they wanted to.
But I'm still, I think if there's people in person here in the library, and if Amherst Media is filming us, and there's people remotely in another location, that's hybrid.
You realize?
And
Yeah.
my experience is that it's really hard to do a hybrid meeting successfully. The town council does a great job with it, but they have the infrastructure and they have a staff member overseeing, like they have Athena, who not only oversees the Zoom, but she lets people into the Zoom and lets people out of the Zoom. They have, each member who's
Yes.
in person also has their own device so that they're shown on the screen, like their face is shown on the screen. Like
Right.
we don't have that infrastructure here. And I think it's and we don't have a staff member to like oversee the logistics of the meeting while it's happening. My opinion is it's really hard to do a hybrid meeting well. That being said, I think if there are one-off occasions when we have an in-person meeting, and if there's one of us that can't be here in person because we all have other obligations, we have allowed that person to join by Google Meet. But I haven't been happy with the way that has worked because if you would please allow me to finish, I would really appreciate it. I haven't been happy with the way that's worked because the person's like just the way we've done it is the person's on the chair's laptop. The chair can see them, but no one else can see them. If the current chair would have a logistical way of like having a dedicated lap for those one-off occasions when we need to have a member remote, if the chair could arrange to have a laptop dedicated to that person, and then we could like turn it so that we could see that person's
Alright,
face.
so
I would be in favor of that type of hybrid meeting.
All right, we're not voting on this tonight.
I understand we're discussing it, so
Yeah,
that's why
discussing it,
that's why I'm
and,
sharing my opinion.
And I'm glad you are. Is there any other discussion on this topic? Because I want to bring it to a conclusion.
I know we're gonna vote on it in the future, but this is not really a hypothetical, because I have to travel internationally for a time period that will encompass meetings. And so, moving forward, I guess I'm curious as to what I should do to attend the meeting.
Well, at this point in time, it would only be the way that Jennifer just discussed it, the way we have done it before, which is you have your own laptop with you or whatever, and the chair provides you access to the meeting via their particular computer, which is, I consider to be horrible, because I've done that. It's just a horrible experience for everyone involved. I would rather find another way of doing that, but obviously the law allows for anyone who wants to or needs to attend the meeting via, virtually. It's allowable. I can't see this committee saying, no, you can't do that, because it's.
So would my procedure be to be in touch with Sasha? Like, who is it who sets up?
It would definitely be in touch with Sasha, myself, because that then would have to be set up here.
Okay, I will be in touch, thank you.
Yes.
I don't want to extend this any longer than it needs to be. I'm just very curious about why can't the computer that's being projected on the screen be the one that receives the person who has to call in? Then we would see them on the screen as well as the agenda.
It seems to me it wouldn't make any difference. It could be on that screen, it could be here, it could,
Could. I mean, I presume we could. Yeah, I mean, we'd have to have a camera, which I think there's one on top of that monitor right there that might shoot in this direction so that they would see all of you. It's a possibility. I mean, I think we can look at that if that's, if a different remote experience is one that, or a different hybrid experience is what we want to do, we can look at what the technology options are and see what's possible.
Yeah, all right. That would be a better way of doing it. Who would that be to sit down with? Myself, you? Who's the person who just, I thought was retired?
Jerry?
Jerry.
Yeah, I'd probably just ask Jerry to start with, just to see what what's possible and, you know, with existing sort of equipment and technology we have, and then we'll have to interface a little bit with Amherst Media, because we want to make sure to pick up the remote person on the broadcast, but I think we can sort of puzzle through those options and see what's possible and
All right.
go from there.
All right, I mean, that's something that I will explore along with the superintendent and Jerry, the tech guy, and Amherst Media, to see, to make sure that when we do hybrid or remote, or some person is missing, that it's a good experience for everyone. I mean, I thought that one time we did virtual, where everyone was virtual at that particular point in time, that it was actually, it was hybrid. Anyway, I don't remember. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. And it disappears. Thank you. All right, future agenda planning. Katie, you're up.
Thank you. I had asked at the beginning of this meeting for the superintendent to bring data for our own elementary school students' absentee records. In addition to that, if I can also circle back to our discussion of the Q1 budget and ask that we can also be provided a Q1 budget template that reflects the same categories as the March 2023 approved budget, so that we can compare, and then also think about, as we move forward to Q2, maintaining that same structure for comparative purposes. Another 2 items I have is, I think it would be wonderful to get an update about the Caminantes program, both in terms of the current challenges and celebrations of that program, but also in terms of long-term planning practices that are being done, knowing that the current Caminantes program is up to and including 4th grade at this point. So just thinking what's happening in the future. And then finally, an update or discussion around student retention. I think we're thinking a lot about 6th grade transition, and I think I see 6th grade as a very opportunistic time where we could really think about what are the trends that we've been seeing in the past few years in terms of student retention or lack thereof between elementary and middle school, and if that data will then inform other decisions we're making in that transition discussion. So those would be my 4 items.
Anyone else? Jennifer?
At some point tonight, I think Doug mentioned having the principals come in. I don't remember that you mentioned it. I don't remember what the topic was, but I think that's a great idea. And just because things have been brought up today that I have questions about, and if members of the public heard it, they may have questions as well. Irv, you mentioned students who miss their musical instrument practice on Mondays. I mean, there are probably lots of things that happen at all of our schools that only happen on Mondays, and Mondays are so often the day that's a holiday. And many institutions have a way of accounting for that, they'll have Monday scheduled on another day. So how do our elementary schools account for the missing Mondays being a holiday and things that are scheduled on Mondays is one question that came up. And then Katie mentioned at Fort River that chorus happens during recess, which bothers me, that students have to choose between chorus and recess. Recess is so important, and chorus is also really important. And she also mentioned that because the music teacher doesn't have a classroom, but not having a classroom is a space issue, and having chorus during recess is a time issue. So that didn't jive with me. Of like, that's the reason chorus has to happen during recess, is because the music teacher doesn't have a classroom. So if we could, is that true that chorus happens during recess, and why, and what can we do about it? Because that's
So we will say this, that
problematic.
course is essentially, you should consider it like an elective, as opposed to, they're getting music class. Course is in addition to that.
Okay.
So just to keep that in mind is part of why it's scheduled differently than say the basic music class. So it's an additional choice. So
Okay, that's helpful. But these are some issues that maybe we could talk to the principals about if they were to come see us.
Doug and I agreed that having the principals come would be a great idea. so that had been in discussions, and we're gonna arrange that. Any others? All right, warrant report.
I have warrants.
You have warrants.
I do have warrants. I sent these to Sasha for posting, but I don't think they got posted, but I will
They
just,
definitely did not get posted.
I will just read them. I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $285,501.31 for the warrant dated 9/29/2023. This includes general fund expenses of $150,977.32, revolving fund expenses of $36,031.53, and grant fund expenses of $69,824.05. And one more. I, Jennifer Shao, authorized by my signature to the Fort River transfer request in the amount of $1,552.66 for the transfer dated 10/18/23. That's it.
Next, any gifts? Jennifer? Any gifts?
I would not be aware of any gifts. That would be the chair or.
I need to. All right, then that brings us to adjournment. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Doug? Yeah. Could you hold in place for a second?